An elderly couple accidentally cuts off a biker on a rain-soaked street. Surrounded by leather-clad riders demanding retribution, they fear the worst. But as the night unfolds, a photo in their car changes everything. And by morning, what began as a terrifying encounter will become an unexpected journey that changes everything. Hi, everyone. Let's get started. Axel Callaway's hands gripped the handlebars of his Harley as the rain began to fall harder on the annual Steel Demons charity ride. At 45, his body carried the evidence of a harder life than most. Faded tattoos crawled up his arms, disappearing beneath his leather jacket, and a jagged scar ran from his left temple down to his jawline. The patches on his vest marked him as a respected member of the Steel Demons, one of the city's oldest motorcycle clubs. Axel had given 20 years of his life to the Steel Demons, finding in them the family and purpose he'd never had growing up. The Brotherhood had accepted him when the rest of society had written him off. Tonight, nearly 100 riders had gathered for their memorial ride, honoring club members who had passed away over the years. The North Side neighborhood wasn't a place respectable folks visited after dark. Known for its drug corners and territorial disputes, it was somewhere you passed through quickly, windows up, doors locked. But it was also where the Steel Demons had their clubhouse, a converted warehouse that served as the heart of their community. The formation of bikes was 3 blocks from their destination when it happened. A beige Buick sedan suddenly pulled out from a side street, cutting directly into Axel's path. He slammed on his brakes, the Harley's tires skidding dangerously on the wet asphalt. Only decades of riding experience kept him from laying the bike down. The Buick jerked to a stop halfway into the intersection, its driver apparently frozen in panic. Behind Axel, the formation of bikers stopped abruptly, engines growling like predators. Within seconds, they had surrounded the car, cutting off any escape route. Axel dismounted, his expression as dark as storm clouds as he approached the driver's side window. Inside, he could see an elderly couple, the man clutching the steering wheel with white knuckles while the woman frantically fumbled with a paper map, her hands shaking. They were at least in their 70s, well-dressed, with the disoriented look of people completely out of their element. The moment they spotted Axel walking toward them, terror flashed across their faces. The woman frantically hit the door lock button, and the man reached across to do the same on his side. "Roll down the window," Axel ordered, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of being respected in the harshest environments. The old man hesitated, then lowered the window just a crack. Enough to communicate, but not enough to create vulnerability. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice quavering. "The GPS stopped working, and we were trying to figure out where we are. I didn't see you coming." Axel noticed several things at once: their out-of-state license plates, the suitcases visible in the back seat, and a small photo pinned to the sun visor. A young man in a police uniform. Behind him, Diesel, one of the larger club members, approached. "Everything cool, Ax? Want us to teach them some road respect?" The implied threat wasn't subtle. The elderly woman's eyes widened in terror, and Axel saw her reach for her husband's arm. Something about their fear didn't sit right with him. They weren't just afraid of the consequences of a traffic mistake. They were afraid for their lives. "You're a long way from wherever you're supposed to be," Axel said, ignoring Diesel's question for the moment. "This isn't a neighborhood for sightseeing." The old man swallowed hard. "We were trying to find our way to Oak Ridge Heights. The hotel. Our son. It's the anniversary. We came to visit the cemetery. His voice cracked slightly. Axel's attention was drawn again to the photo on the visor, the young cop in his dress uniform. Something nagged at his memory. A face he should recognize but couldn't quite place. Oak Ridge Heights is on the other side of the city, Axel said. You're heading deeper into North Side. Not somewhere you want to be after dark. Diesel's patience was wearing thin. Come on, Axel. Let's get moving. Make them pay for the disrespect and get to the clubhouse. It's pissing rain out here. The couple tensed at Diesel's words, the woman closing her eyes as if in prayer. Axel made a decision that surprised even himself. Back up, Dee, I've got this. He turned to the frightened couple. What's your name? Harold Collins, the man said after a moment. And this is my wife, Margaret. Collins. The name, combined with the police photo, triggered something in Axel's memory. He leaned closer, studying the picture more carefully. The young officer's face suddenly clicked into place, a face he hadn't seen in nearly 15 years, but would never forget. That your son? Axel asked, pointing to the photo. Margaret Collins instinctively reached toward it as if to protect it from Axel's gaze. Yes, Officer Michael Collins? Axel stepped back, a cold wave washing over him despite the warm rain. Officer Michael Collins, the rookie cop who'd found Axel bleeding out in an alley 15 years ago. The officer who'd made a choice that night that changed everything. A choice to help rather than arrest a known biker who should have been his enemy. Your son, Axel said slowly. Michael Collins, 5-year veteran, worked the East Precinct. The surprise on their faces was immediate. Harold's expression shifted from fear to confusion. You knew Michael? Axel looked over his shoulder at his increasingly impatient brothers, particularly at Marcus, who had been with the club longest and commanded everyone's respect. Marcus! Axel called to him. Need a minute here. Marcus approached, curiosity evident beneath his rain-soaked beard. The respect Axel had earned over the years meant his request wouldn't be dismissed. Turning back to the Collins, Axel lowered his voice. Your son saved my life once, a long time ago. I owe him everything. Margaret's hand went to her mouth. Michael never mentioned... She looked at Axel's patches, his scarred face, clearly struggling to imagine her police officer's son having any connection to this world. He wouldn't have, Axel said. Wasn't something either of us could talk about, but I never forgot. He straightened up, making a decision. You can't stay here. This neighborhood isn't safe, especially not for you two. I'll get you to Oak Ridge Heights. Harold's face showed open disbelief. Why would you help us? Because your son helped me when he had every reason not to, Axel answered simply. He turned to Marcus and quietly explained the situation. That cop in the photo? He saved my life back in 2008, found me after I got jumped, got me medical help instead of prison, never told anyone. Marcus studied Axel's face, then glanced at the frightened couple in the car. After a moment, he nodded. Then we helped them for you. Axel returned to the Collins car, where both Harold and Margaret watched the bikers' conversation with visible anxiety. Here's what's going to happen, Axel said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You're going to follow me. Some of my brothers and I will escort you to Oak Ridge Heights. No one will harm you. You have my word. Harold stared at him. Why should we trust you? Axel met his gaze directly. Because your son did once. And I've spent 15 years trying to be worthy of that trust. For a long moment, the only sound was the drumming of rain on the Buick's roof and the rumble of motorcycle engines. Then, slowly, Harold nodded. Axel returned to his bike, giving quick instructions to Marcus and a few others. The majority of riders would continue to the clubhouse, but Axel, Marcus, and 6 others would escort the Collins to safety. The formation changed, now positioning itself as an escort. 2 riders in front of the Buick, 2 on either side, the rest following behind, a protective bubble of leather and chrome around the vulnerable sedan. As they pulled away from the intersection, Axel's mind raced with memories he'd spent years trying to suppress. Officer Michael Collins had been 26 when he found Axel. Just a rookie cop working the night shift in a neighborhood veterans of the force avoided. Axel had been 30, bleeding out from a knife wound after being jumped by a group of men outside a bar. By all rights, Michael should have called for backup, had Axel arrested, let him face the consequences of the life he'd chosen. Instead, he'd loaded Axel into his patrol car and taken him to a clinic run by a doctor who helped people who couldn't go to hospitals. He'd returned later not to arrest him, but to talk about choices, about possibilities, about the fact that even someone with Axel's background deserved a chance to live. Axel had never understood why the young officer had taken such a risk for him. When he'd finally asked, Michael had simply said, "Everyone deserves a second chance, even the ones society's given up on." Now, as Axel led the small procession of bikes through the rain-slicked streets, with Michael's parents safely in the middle, the weight of that debt pressed down on him with renewed force. He owed Michael Collins his life, and tonight, by some cosmic coincidence or divine intervention, he had the chance to repay a fraction of that debt by helping the people Michael had loved most. The unusual procession drew attention as they moved through the city. A beige Buick sedan, escorted by 8 intimidating bikers in full club colors. At major intersections, riders moved ahead to stop traffic, ensuring smooth passage. The formation sent a clear message to anyone watching. This car was under protection, untouchable. When they finally arrived at the Oakage Heights Hotel, Axel signaled for the others to hang back as he escorted the Collins to the entrance. The elderly couple emerged from their car looking shaken, but unharmed. "Thank you," Margaret said, her voice steadier now. "I don't understand the connection between you and Michael, but thank you for helping us." Axel nodded, suddenly uncomfortable with their gratitude. "Your son was a good man, one of the few who saw people for who they could be, not just who they were." Harold studied Axel with a gaze that seemed to cut through the superficial. "You said he saved your life." "In more ways than one," Axel acknowledged. He hesitated, then made another decision that went against every instinct of self-preservation he developed in his years on the streets. "I'd like to pay my respects tomorrow if that's acceptable to you." Surprise flickered across Harold's face. "You want to visit Michael's grave? With us?" "Not with you," Axel clarified quickly. "After you. I wouldn't intrude on your grief, but I've never been able to properly thank him or honor what he did." Margaret and Harold exchanged a glance, some unspoken communication passing between them that only decades of marriage could facilitate. "The cemetery visit is at 10 a.m., Harold finally said. "We'll be done by 11. "Sakurwat." After that, perhaps we could hear more about how you knew our son. Axel nodded, understanding the tentative olive branch being extended. I'll be there at 11:15. He turned to leave, then paused. Your son changed my life. I just thought you should know that. Back with the other riders, Marcus waited with a questioning look. Tomorrow? Axel promised. I need some time alone tonight. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You know where to find us if you need anything. As the others thundered back toward the clubhouse, Axel broke off, needing time alone with his thoughts. He rode through the rain to a deserted viewpoint that overlooked the city lights. There, in the solitude of the storm, he pulled something from his inner vest pocket, a small, worn police challenge coin that had been pressed into his hand 15 years ago. For when you decide what kind of man you really want to be, Officer Collins had said. Axel had carried it every day since, a reminder of a debt unpaid until now. The next morning broke clear and cool, the storm having washed the city clean overnight. Axel arrived at Evergreen Cemetery at exactly 11:15, having watched from a distance as Harold and Margaret Collins concluded their visit to their son's grave. They had left flowers, white lilies, and now stood at the cemetery entrance, clearly waiting for him despite their lingering uncertainty. As Axel approached on foot, leather vest replaced with a respectable black jacket, he noticed their surprise at the transformation. Without the club colors and surrounded by peaceful gravestones instead of rumbling bikes, he looked almost like someone they might pass on the street without fear. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, he greeted them with a nod. You came alone, Harold observed, glancing past him as if expecting to see bikers lurking among the headstones. This is personal, Axel explained. Between me and Michael and you. Margaret gestured toward a bench beneath a sheltering oak tree. Perhaps you could tell us how you knew our son, the real story this time. For the next half hour, as birds sang in the branches above them, Axel told them a carefully edited version of how he'd met their son. He didn't specify what he was doing in that part of town, or the exact circumstances that had led to him being stabbed. Instead, he described being attacked. Officer Collin finding me, taking me to get medical help. He talked to me afterward, Axel explained, his rough voice softening with the memory. Not like I was some criminal, but like I was someone worth saving. Asked me what I'd do with the second chance he was giving me. Margaret wiped tears from her eyes. That sounds like Michael, always seeing possibilities in people. I never understood why, Axel admitted. I wasn't worth the risk he took. My son believed that everyone deserves compassion, Harold said, his initial suspicion gradually giving way to something more complex. Even people, society, has written off, especially them. Actually, Axel nodded, remembering Michael's words almost verbatim. He said something similar to me. What happened to him? Margaret asked hesitantly. Did you ever... No, Axel said firmly, understanding her unspoken question. I had nothing to do with his death. I read about it in the papers, went to the funeral, but stayed back. Didn't seem right to intrude. He was shot, responding to a convenience store robbery, Harold said, his voice hollow with old grief. 2 weeks before his 30th birthday. A silence fell between them, filled with the weight of loss and misconnections. I'd like to show you something, Axel finally said. If you're willing, it won't take long. Harold and Margaret exchanged uncertain glances, but curiosity won out. What is it? something Michael helped create without ever knowing it. 20 minutes later, Axel led the Collins car through the gates of what appeared to be a renovated warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. The sign above the entrance read, "Second Chance Garage and Training Center." Inside, the large space was divided between an active motorcycle repair shop and what looked like a classroom area. A dozen people of various ages were at work, some on bikes, others at computers, or around a conference table. As Axel entered with the Collins, activity paused, attention shifting to the unexpected visitors. Marcus approached, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Like many in the room, he wore a shirt with the shop's logo, a phoenix rising from chains. "Like the visitors you called about?" he asked quietly. Axel nodded. "This is Harold and Margaret Collins, Michael's parents." Recognition flickered in Marcus's eyes. Axel had clearly shared some version of his story. Marcus extended a massive hand to the still confused couple. "Your son's memory is respected here," he said simply. Axel led them through the facility, explaining as they walked. "After what happened with Michael, I started thinking about his words, about second chances. I found other people who believed in the same idea, a place where we could help people whose society had given up on, ex-cons, veterans with PTSD, kids aging out of foster care, people who needed skills and community." The tour revealed a fully functioning business, part custom motorcycle shop, part training program, part support network. "Everyone here has a similar story," Axel continued. "Some I helped directly. Others were helped by people we reached. But it all traces back to your son and what he did for me 15 years ago." Margaret stared at a wall of photographs showing graduates of the program with their completed bike builds, certification certificates, and job placements. "Michael never mentioned any of this." "He wouldn't have known," Axel said softly. "This started after he was gone, but it wouldn't exist without him." Harold's expression had transformed throughout the tour. His earlier weariness replaced with something that looked almost like wonder. "You built all this because of one interaction with our son. Your son saw me as someone worth saving when no one else did," Axel said simply. "I've spent 15 years trying to pay that forward." As they continued through the facility, Axel introduced them to others whose lives had been changed. A former addict, now serving as the program's substance abuse counselor, an Afghanistan veteran who taught mechanical skills, a former gang member who mentored at-risk youth. "Twice a year," Axel explained, "we organize a memorial ride in Michael's honor. The proceeds fund scholarships for kids from North Side to attend trade school. We never used his name publicly, out of respect for your privacy. But his spirit is in everything we do here." By the time they reached Axel's office, Margaret was openly weeping while Harold struggled to maintain his composure. On Axel's desk sat a framed news clipping of Officer Michael Collins's obituary alongside the police challenge coin, now mounted in a simple display case. "I'd like to show you one more thing," Axel said, leading them back outside where the rumble of motorcycles could now be heard approaching. In the parking lot, over 50 motorcycles were assembling in formation, some bearing Steel Demons colors, others wearing the Second Chance logo, still others unaffiliated, but clearly part of the extended community Axel had helped build. "What is this?" Harold asked, his voice barely audible over the engines. "In our world, this is how we show respect," Axel explained. A rider's escort is the highest honor we can give. These people are here because directly or indirectly, your son's actions touched their lives. They'd like to escort you to Michael's grave, if you'll allow it." Margaret stepped forward, visibly moved. "But we've already visited this morning. This isn't for your benefit," Axel said gently. "It's for theirs. For us, a chance to publicly honor someone who many of them never met, but whose legacy changed their lives." For a long moment, Harold and Margaret looked at each other, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then, Harold turned to Axel. "Michael's funeral was just family and fellow officers," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We wanted nothing to do with the part of the city where he died, nothing to do with the people he worked among." He gestured around them. "But I see now that we were wrong, that we missed understanding an important part of who our son was." An hour later, the procession moved through the city streets. More than 50 motorcycles escorting a beige Buick, creating a protective bubble around the elderly couple. At major intersections, riders moved ahead to stop traffic, ensuring smooth passage for the formation. Curious onlookers stopped to watch the unusual procession, some even removing their hats as they passed, sensing the solemnity of the moment. At the cemetery gates, the motorcycles formed two lines, creating an honor guard pathway. Harold and Margaret walked between them, heads held high despite their tears, as they led the procession to Michael's grave for the second time that day. Each rider stood at attention beside their bike, showing respect in the only way they knew how. Axel hung back, allowing others to pay their respects first. Men and women who had found redemption through the program Michael had unwittingly inspired came forward one by one, each placing a single white rose on the headstone. When the last rose had been placed, Axel stepped forward, removing the challenge coin from his pocket, his most treasured possession for 15 years. "He gave me this," Axel explained to Harold and Margaret. "The last time I saw him, said it was for when I decided what kind of man I really wanted to be." He knelt, placing the coin atop the headstone. "I think he'd be okay with me leaving it here now. The decision's been made." Harold reached out, placing a hand on Axel's shoulder, a gesture of connection that bridged worlds that were never meant to touch. "My son saw something in you worth saving. I think I understand why now." As the unlikely gathering gradually dispersed, the Collins found themselves surrounded by people sharing stories, not of Michael directly, as few had known him, but of second chances, of moments when someone's belief had changed the trajectory of a life. In each story, the echo of Michael's compassion lived on. Later, as Axel prepared to say goodbye to the Collins, Harold pulled him aside. "I was a judge for 40 years before retiring," he said quietly. "I sent many young men to prison who looked like you did 15 years ago. I never once considered what might become of them if someone just offered another path." Instead of the condemnation Axel might once have expected, Harold continued. "What you've built here, this legacy of second chances, I think it would have meant everything to Michael to know his faith in you created all of this." He extended his hand. "We'll be staying in town for a few more days. Perhaps you could introduce us to more of these people whose lives changed because of our son's legacy. We'd like to know that part of his story, too." As Axel shook Harold's hand, he felt something shift inside him. A weight he'd carried for 15 years finally beginning to lift. He'd spent half his life trying to honor the second chance Michael Collins had given him. Now, in the tear-filled eyes of Michael's parents, he finally saw what he'd been looking for. Recognition that sometimes the most unlikely connections create the most powerful ripples through time. That evening, as Axel rode back to his apartment, he took a different route than usual, passing the alley where he'd nearly bled out 15 years ago. He stopped his motorcycle at the entrance, staring down the narrow passage that had been both an ending and a beginning for him. The next morning, Axel woke with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Before heading to the garage, he took the frame that had held the challenge coin and placed a photo inside instead. A picture taken at the cemetery of Harold and Margaret Collins, surrounded by 50 bikers, all standing in solemn respect for an officer most had never met, but whose legacy had saved them all.